Thank you for joining us on our journey here to preserve the history of mixed martial arts. When I wanted to take on this project, I needed help. I brought in one of my favorite matchmakers, Miguel Iturrate, and the MMA detective, Mike Davis. So to do this, we've been able to preserve history. Welcome and enjoy. Okay, welcome back, podcast fans, members, everybody. We're doing another one of our deep dives here tonight. And as you can tell by watching, we have two different guests on who've already been here, but they're not here to talk about themselves. We're doing a deep dive and a little bit about the career of Travis Fulton. And obviously, you guys know he's no longer with us, so I thought I'd bring on some people who know a little bit about his career. I think everybody here has known Travis since at some time in the 90s, and he does have a fascinating career, which is the reason for this deep dive. So, Mike, go ahead and lead us in and let these guys who have a wealth of knowledge of everything kind of help enlighten us a little bit.
So I think the first thing that we need to kind of put out there before we get too deep into this is what Travis did was horrific. All of us can agree with it. There's nobody disputing that. And what he did was he took a plea of guilty for what the actions he did. He just never saw his day in court to accept it. So there's nobody here defending his actions. But when you look at the totality of his record, what he's done in the sport of mixed martial arts, we're an MMA history podcast. It would be foolish for us to ignore what it is that he's accomplished, done, who he was as a person. And I think we're going to be pretty brutally honest here, and it's touchy subject matter. But if we don't cover it, we've all known Travis since like the late 90s, me, early 2000s. You're going to hear a bunch of people talk about Travis that have never met him. So we might as well do it here. So, Jeremy, I think you've known Travis the longest. No, Monte, you may have, because you've known him since he was 17. Am I correct?
Right.
So why don't you let us know, each of you two, let us know how you guys met Travis, and let's just start the conversation from there.
You want to start, Jeremy?
Yeah, I think, Monte and I think we probably met Travis at about the same time, although Monte probably had better dealings with him because on Travis's first fight, I was on that same card. So you probably had better, close dealings with him at that point, but I met him that day. And I don't know, he was a young, tough guy that was scrappy and willing to fight. And that's really all anybody knew about him early on. And then just, most of us, his career was fairly out in the open, it was pretty public, I guess. Fought every chance he got. And then at some point he just decided that it was more important for him to get lots of fights rather than quality fights. And that's, and then obviously everything else just kind of, went off the rails after that.
Yeah, we met about the same time. It was, Jeremy was only 1-0 when we met. So that was a few months ago.
That's bonkers.
Just a few months ago. And
Yes.
And Travis was 17. He had called me. I was doing my first extreme challenge. And he got on that first one. And then I liked his I guess his enthusiasm. He was a young kid that went out and tried. He just didn't know a lot. But he was tough, street tough. And so I kept putting him on, and he actually fought for me my first 20 extreme challenges. He fought in every single one of them. And so that meant he and Jeremy were together on a lot of them, because Jeremy fought for me on almost all of those also stuff. But that's what I remember most about the early meeting was he didn't care who he fought. He didn't really, weight classes weren't a big deal back then. He just loved fighting. And he eventually got pretty damn good at it.
Yeah.
Now, Monte, would you say back then it seemed like back then a lot of the guys, almost would you say, I feel like that's just how it was. A lot of times you just like to fight. You fought a lot of different weight classes, whoever was available. Yeah. Was that not you? Was that pretty unique to just certain individuals, or was it just kind of more prevalent back then?
I guess, everyone wanted to fight. When you back then, people, if they broke their finger or something, they would hide it from me. Or even with a broken hand, they would say, "Don't take me out of the fight." Yeah. And the guys back then wanted to fight. now it's like, it seems like guys are almost looking for a way out of the fight.
Yeah.
It was a complete opposite, because they knew if they missed this time around, they may have to wait 6 months. They wanted to fight. And I just think Travis, what stood out for me with him was he was the one that would get on the phone and call me 3 or 4 times a week. Did you get me? You got me on the next one. You got me in. I mean, he just showed me that enthusiasm. And I was new to the sport. I was coming over from boxing. I just didn't have guys like that, And so that's what he stood out. There were a lot of other guys that were very similar, that always wanted to fight. I mean, Jeremy was always greedy. He wanted every fight he could get, and pretty much I got him for him. I mean, to think how many fights I booked for him total, but he he didn't have to bug me every day. He was, when they first started out, Jeremy was definitely the more talented of the two. And you could see him. I could see Jeremy really going somewhere, and all I had to compare him to was Pat, because at that time, Pat was the best guy I'd seen. And Pat was more well-rounded, but Jeremy on the ground and stuff was so good that it made up for it.
Well, Jeremy had incredible patience on the ground. Like, the pressure that people would put on Jeremy wouldn't faze him, and he'd be patient. But when you look at the beginning of Travis's career and his size, like, you're kind of saying the opposite of what Miguel and I had talked pre-prep, thinking that maybe Travis looked like he had a little bit more upside than Jeremy initially, and then just kind of like the tides changed.
You're talking about the early days. You have Horn, who, was coming in with his submissions clearly ahead. But I think that, Travis, when he was focused, could adapt that boxer wrestler type of, Don Fry type of approach, which, at the time looked like it would work for him. And also, I think, I don't know if he did steroids at that point in his career, if he was just strong, naturally, I think it may be a combination of the both, at least strength-wise and stuff. You can check off a couple of boxes where Travis had a little more upside than Jeremy in some cases.
I'm more talking about the really early times when he was 17. His first fight for me was at 170.
Woo!
I mean, he was just a 17-year-old kid. So,
was it Dave Strasser?
Yep. Yeah, who was a 170 fighter.
That's not an easy fight.
Yeah.
So that's where I knew, and at the time, see, I didn't know Strasser. I didn't know how good he was. So all I saw was he got beat, and he looked tough, but he didn't know the ground. I mean, that's where he would get in trouble. And so to me, it just looked like a guy that was a good street type fighter, but I didn't know how far he would go because the submissions weren't there.
Both of them made their UFC's debuts around the same era, around the same time. Jeremy, I think, was UFC like 16, and Travis around that same time too. And, right around there, they made it at the same time. They were very similar. And then, you really start to see things go off the rails there because, the consistency just wasn't going to be there. And like you said, he started to make, bad choices with fights. The UFC didn't care, but they weren't going to bring it back either.
What was it like to be a sports writer? To be there for historical moments and unforgettable performances? Oh, there are stories. I'm Todd Jones, recovering from 30 years as a sports writer. Join me on Pressbox Access. You'll hear from some of the best reporters and writers of the past 50 years about their experiences with the greatest athletes, coaches, and sports events. We tell stories behind the stories. Some we've only told each other. And there's some laughs, too. Let us buy you around on Pressbox Access.
Yeah.
Now, Jeremy, you fought him 3 times. And when we did our deep dive with you, I'm just going to be real direct with you. I got a ton of respect for you, like as a fighter, as a person, gym owner, all of that. But when I went through your record, I see these Travis Fulton fights, and I talked to Monte prior to this, so which is why I'm bringing it up now. It's not like I'm surprising you with it. But you've got 2 draws against Travis. And my forethought is, and a win. My forethought is, okay, well, they probably drove there together. Their opponents fell off. They did a heavy sparring fight, got a little bit of cash for it. called it a draw because no one got finished and went home. And then when it counted, you beat him. Am I off on that?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good.
Well, yeah. So the first time we fought, I was on the undercard of when Pat fought, and I think is
Brennan.
when he fought Asloan. Pat Asloan, is that who he fought, Monty?
Or was it Chris? It was Extreme Challenge 9. Was that not Brennan? I think that was Brennan outside.
Yep. Yeah, it might have been Brennan. Yep. So, but anyway, so it starts raining, and obviously we can't miss Pat. So I got moved to after him. So I was actually the last fight after the main event, and it was super slippery. And back then we didn't use any judges. We just figured if it went the distance, then it was a draw because there weren't enough people there to have, to trust quality judges. We didn't really know enough about the sport at that time. So that one was actually one of our the closer of the two.
Yeah.
We were slippery. It was hard to move, and he's tough as hell. He always was. He hit hard, and he just didn't care about getting hit. So, you pair
Back
that with
then.
his wrestling and aggressive, and he was a dangerous guy. But I still think I should have won that fight had there been judges, but it is what it is. It was, a no decision. It was a draw. The second time we fought was a little bit different. I beat him so badly he couldn't talk right for a couple of weeks after that fight.
Oof.
But again, no judges, so if it goes the distance, it goes to a draw. But yeah, and then obviously the third fight was he was already kind of on the downward slide. He didn't much care anymore. He was quite a bit heavier, and just he didn't care anymore. Just getting paid, I think, and wanted to rack up fights.
So when did the switch happen? When did the switch happen from him actually caring to not caring?
I don't know. I mean, I guess if I looked up his record, I could probably kind of zero in on it. But I think it was some point. He had a handful of big fights that didn't go his way, and then I think he just decided that, if I can't win these fights, fuck it, I'm going to go after lots of fights.
Yeah, I think.
Now, Jeremy, would you think that? I mean, the difference between you and him, obviously, there's lots of them, but you were always dedicated to your craft. And I mean, even though you're fighting, like you put in a lot of hours in training. Did he not put in was he not dedicated to the training part? Did he just go and fight? Is that what the difference was, you think?
Yeah, I remember early on when I was in Iowa, he would come and stay with Rick Gravison, a good friend of ours. And Rick told me that Travis was like obsessed with recording fights. He would like write down fight results in notebooks from all over, fights that happen anywhere all over. He was just recording everything. So he really was a student of the sport. He really loved the sport and he loved to fight, but he didn't want to work hard. He just wanted to go in and fight and have fun and win. And, he wanted to win, obviously, but towards the end, he's like, I'll take whatever I've got into the ring with me. And if it's good enough to win, great. If not, so be it. Because he just didn't want to train hard, but he did want to fight hard.
You put yourself at a pretty low ceiling there. You know what I mean? I mean, you're gonna beat your average guy and some good guys, but you're never gonna beat the great guys like that.
Right.
Till you really put forth dedication like you're talking about. Okay, that helps explain a lot because he had a lot of fights.
Yeah, he was very much a student of the sport, though. He watched all the fights and he would study things and he would learn a lot. Just getting more knowledge of the fights, who's fighting where and who's doing what. But when it came to actually training hard, that's where he really would fail.
Would he show up over at Militich?
On and off.
Not very often, really, though. He was, I think people convinced him. He was. I remember when he went to Brazil and he got beat up pretty good, and I think he kind of got the idea that okay, maybe I'm not going to be a champion. He wasn't. When he did show up to Pat's, he wasn't doing as well. And he had a whole bunch of like, I hate to call them cronies, but he had a whole following of really young kids that just thought he was the, the star of Waterloo and whatever, what we're over there. But he was the star. And I mean, he had these guys run around if he needed a pop. I mean, they'd jump up and run to the store and get him a pop. I mean, it was Travis Fulton. And they all started kind of saying, and, you have more fights than anyone. And the Ironman thing came up, and I think there was just a point that he said, you know what, this is my future. This is what I can do. And he would call people for fights, and he didn't care about the money. Like he'd go to Brazil for $500 if he just wanted to get there and get fights. And so they just started adding up, but so did his losses. And I think as tough as he was, he was a really good below UFC level guy. Not too many club guys were going to beat him. And he actually kind of ran those guys over. But once you got to UFC level, there's not many guys. If you look at all those wins, I challenge you to find 5 wins that you can say that's an upset. I really don't even think there's 5. There were some good ones
in the beginning. There's some good ones in the beginning,
gotcha.
Middle and end.
But then it went. Exist. I mean, the last 200 and some. If he fought someone good, he lost.
True.
And that's how you got 50 and some losses. And the sport kept evolving, and he was still Travis.
Even a young Ben Rothwell beat him. So, like, you're talking about an unpolished, unrefined Ben Rothwell who was probably 18 or 19 years old at the time that he fought Travis.
Ben Rothwell at 18 was a friggin' monster.
Yeah.
he was, wasn't he, Jeremy? I mean, he was a 270-pound behemoth. Wow. I mean, his first fight for me was against Tim Sylvia, and they went to a decision, and it was pretty close. That's when I knew Tim was good, because Ben was no joke. He was a big son of a bitch. Man. But there again, Travis wasn't a 220-pound guy. We knew what he was. He didn't train, so he didn't lose weight, and he ate a lot.
And he knew his promoters, like Chad Bergmeyer. He fought more for Chad Bergmeyer more than I think anybody else. It was because he could always get what he wanted on that show. Like Travis, he never took the hard way. He took the easy way. If there was a way to kind of beat the system, Travis was there.
Yeah,
sure.
And people would come out to see him in the Midwest. I mean, and he lived in the middle of Iowa. Chad, was right there, and so it made sense. Chad was doing shows all over Iowa, and when you brought him in, it was. It was having a name. He was a name guy, but really all he wanted was the fights. He didn't really care. You didn't have to pay him much.
So Monte,
he was also willing to do those Dan Severn fights that popped up all over the place too, that were a little iffy.
So Monte, would you compare him at all? Like, you're a boxing guy, and I'm sure Reggie Strickland. Would you compare him to like a Reggie Strickland, or not really?
No, Reggie, his record is a flip flop. I mean, he's got the 200, but not that he couldn't.
But Reggie can fight. But Reggie can fight.
Yeah, but I think he was better than Reggie. Didn't care. Travis wanted to win.
Okay.
He enjoyed winning. I think Reggie enjoyed the game of taking on these guys and not letting them knock him out so he could fight the next day. That kind of thing.
So for the people
Travis
at home,
wanted to win.
Yeah, for the people at home, Reggie Strickland was a journeyman boxer that fought under several names. He's probably got about 400 fights. I mean, maybe 250, 300 fights under his real name, with maybe 12 wins and 200 some odd losses.
No. He was about 75 and 270 or something.
Yeah, there you go.
He could fight a little bit, man.
He was impossible to finish. He was also impossible to finish.
He didn't get finished. He fought every weekend. I mean, I fought him once, man. I mean,
and Reggie also fought multiple world champions, and I think only a few of them actually finished him. Reggie was a special defensive fighter.
Yeah. He couldn't get knocked out. If he got knocked out, he couldn't fight, and he was fighting on Tuesday again. And then on Tuesday he's fighting on Thursday. If you get knocked out, it's 30 days.
Exactly.
Just to jump in here too, and since we're talking about boxing, we do want to add, and I'll mention a comment, is that Fulton took on probably about 50 professional boxing matches, And it's a little bit hard.
75.
Yeah,
cheat the
70,
system there.
70,
Yeah, maybe he got to
75.
70. I mean, if at some point he fought like Chaz Weatherspoon and got to a certain level. I'll tell you, the last time I spoke to him, he confided in me, and he was still boxing and doing MMA, but for the 60, 70 boxing matches he had, he said he made more money for those than he did for all his MMA fights combined. So just something to keep in mind there.
Yeah.
He has been fighting some good guys.
He fought Ty Fields. Remember
Tyson Fury's brother.
Know who Ty Fields is?
Yeah.
And got to be one of the biggest boxers ever. 6'9", huge roided out monster from Des Moines. And we couldn't find anyone to fight him. And I said, well, I got a guy in MMA, fight anyone. And we called Travis. He goes, sure. And then he gets in and he looks at him and it's like, oh my God. I mean, that guy he'd step over the ropes like Sylvia used to do. And I mean, he was the most built guy I've ever seen like that. It was scary. And he came out and hit Ty with a right hand right off the bat. Bam. And Ty like turns his head, and then Travis went, oh shit.
Yeah,
that was all he had.
Me back now.
Yep. And so he's got Miletich in his corner, and about 30 seconds in, Ty hits him with a body shot, and down goes Fulton. And he's laying on his side, looking right into Pat. And Pat's going, all right, Travis, just breathe. And they're going 6, 7. Take your time. He goes, we're going to get up at 8. We're going to get up at 8. 9, 10. It's over. They could have went 247, 248. Travis wasn't moving. He was going. He was on his side. Pat jumps in and comes over, and he can't move. His body is completely frozen from that shot. And he told me, he goes, that's the hardest I've ever been hit in my life. He goes, his whole body just went numb.
So Jeremy,
Pat was over there. Get up at 8.
Yeah, no, that happened. Yeah.
Jeremy, you've spent quite a bit of time with him and had a different type of relationship than, like, let's just say, Monte. Why don't you describe your relationship with Travis, or can you recall any stories involving him that might properly describe his character?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about this before. So I traveled with him for about a year. I think it was 99. I just, he had contacts all over, and promoters all over would use him. And I just said, look, man, I want to fight everybody. Fight anybody that contacts you for a fight, tell them I want to fight as well. So he and I fought together almost every weekend somewhere. So we traveled a lot together. I saw a lot of times when he was bringing his buddy as his opponent. A lot of times he would go in and fight tough guys, but there was a lot of times where he would convince his buddy that was driving him down there to come with so that he could fight. So Travis could, get a win, get a fight, whatever. And he would always promise like, hey, I'll just, I'll take you down and submit you, and the guy to fight. And then, then the fight would start and Travis would knock the guy out.
Wow. That's messed up.
I remember one time we were driving back from the show, and I don't remember the guy's name. I want to say his name was Noah something, but I'm not entirely certain.
Sean Nolan?
No, it's Noah. Noah something was his name. And he and Travis got in an argument for some reason, and over something minor, like, when to stop to go to the bathroom or grab a drink or get food or something meaningless. And Travis just got pissed off at him and reached up from the back seat and punched him in the mouth. Just rude and just kind of a bully shit to do, that kind of thing was fairly typical. That was pretty typical.
Yeah, he's when you look at his record, he's got like Dan Wheatley, Sean Nolan. There's a couple reoccurring. Dan.
Yeah, and I mean, there's guys on his record that he's fought 6, 7, 8 times, and then if you go look at that guy's record, he's only got 8 or 9 fights, and they're mostly to Travis.
I think Sean Nolan might be like 2-34, 2-42, something crazy like that.
Right. But that's the thing. I mean, Travis would promote his own shows. For a while, he was running his own gym. And when he would promote his own shows, he would have 7 of his students enter an 8-man tournament with him and then rack up 3 wins on his own show, fighting his own students.
Jeremy, he went on a lot of those. He fought round robin first, so
Sure.
he'd pick up 7 wins, and then he'd do the tournament, so he could get 10 wins.
He
So, he's got a lot of fights, I guess. I mean, technically, if you get in the ring and you beat somebody up, it's a fight. But if you count legitimate fights against opponents that actually had a chance to beat him, I mean, he'd be down in the 50s. Like, he easily has 150 or 200 fights against his students or local people that had no chance of beating him.
Wow.
If you put me
Or
in
like
the
you
cage
said,
with
he
a 12-year-old
brought
girl,
with them.
yeah. I mean, you can put me in the cage with a 12-year-old girl and call it a real fight, but we all know what's gonna happen. She's
It's
gonna whip
true.
my ass like nobody's business.
Well,
Yeah, so that was one of the things people talk about, how many fights he had, and that was the point. At the end of the day, that was his goal, was to have as many fights as he could, be known as the guy that had more fights than anybody else, and he didn't care how he got them. I imagine there was more than a handful that were like legitimately fixed. Like, he would just pay a guy to take a dive, but most of the time he would just pick people that didn't have a chance.
Well, we had
Basically a fixed fight as well, right? I mean, if you're gonna pick somebody that has no chance to beat you, is that any different than paying somebody to take a dive?
So we had Travis View on, and they fought 3 times. And Travis is super nice guy. Like, Monte, I think the best thing that ever happened to Travis was running into you, and you took care of the guy. And Travis said that on the 3rd time that they fought, it was on Bergmeyer's show. He's like, I cut him open, beat him up, and in the ring, Travis is going, man, it's my hometown. Let me get my hand raised. You get the money, you get the belt. Let me just get out of here. But I can't lose in front of my hometown. And if you know Travis View, he's not going. He's not doing that little shenanigan, because it's going to show up on his record as a loss. And that's not the type of human being he is.
Right.
And he's like, no, I'll stand here all night. I'm getting my hand raised, I'm getting my belt, and I'm getting the money. And, Travis was trying to work a deal, but Travis he didn't have a lot of character, at least in my dealings with him. And I think he was just kind of bringing View along, hoping one day he'd be able to kind of do a fixed fight with them. And it culminated into this fight on Chad Bergmeyer's show, where even Chad got in the ring and was, hey, we'll give you a little bit more money. Could you just not get your hand raised because it's his hometown? We'll just kind of figure this out. And View wasn't going, but that's kind of an accurate description of who Travis Fulton is.
Yep. No, it got to a point where all he cared about was the win, and he didn't care how he got it. And that's how he fought so much, is he would tell people, hey, I'll fight for almost nothing. And they'll say, well, it's going to cost us to get an opponent. Oh, I'll bring out an opponent. And then he would say, give me $500, give my opponent $300. And then, of course, the guy coming with him is not getting paid, so he got $800.
Wow.
You got a free ticket to the show. You can get in for free.
Hell, he got a front row seat. He got to be in the cage, actually. This is a good thing in a way. You talk about this stuff is kind of impossible nowadays, I would think. So say what you will, these were the good old days, if that's how you want to phrase them. But, the commissions, I think, make it very, very difficult to have anything like this happen anymore.
Right.
So Monte, in this, you guys, in terms of on the administrative side, back then, now, you couldn't have gotten any higher on the regional level than that of yourself. Jeremy, when you walked into a locker room, no matter where it was across the world, you commanded respect based on the totality of your record. I mean, those are both of your reputations that you've earned. When a guy like Travis sees both of you guys, Monte, we'll start with you. Do you think there was any little bit of embarrassment about what he was doing because he knew that you knew that what he was doing was kind of bogus?
In all honesty, I don't think so. I think he didn't care. He was so into it. I mean, Travis, and I'm not just here to bash him because, I like the guy and he certainly had good qualities. But, the integrity of the sport was not one of them. He didn't care. He had a goal, how to get, that he needed to get these wins and such. And he didn't really care how he did it, and he would tell me, I mean, and I don't know if I've even mentioned this to Jeremy before anything, but when I would talk about Jeremy, Fulton really envied you. He thought anytime I said, we talked about records and stuff, and how many he had, he would say, yeah, but Jeremy's the real, I mean, he would admit it. He goes, I know he's the guy and stuff. He goes,
I've heard him say that about Jeremy too.
He would. And he said, I know it. He goes, but he goes, this is my, all I care about. He wanted to be the king of his hometown. And he was able to get stories written in the paper about him. And he was treated like a star in his hometown. And that's really all he cared about. I don't think it embarrassed him.
Jeremy, what about yourself? Do you think it embarrassed him when talking to you?
I don't know if embarrassed is the right word. I mean, like, we both knew, it's kind of one of those things, like, you can make eye contact with somebody and you both know nobody has to say a word, but again, I agree with Monte. I don't know if it necessarily embarrassed him, but he certainly wasn't gonna try to brag up his fights. He's like, this is what I'm doing. Yes, we both know what it is. It is what it is. Let's move on, So maybe embarrassment is the right word, and maybe a little bit, but like I said, he was doing what he wanted to do. He wanted to have the most amount of fights, and he didn't care how he got there.
Yeah.
That's wild. That's wild. Now, Jeremy, when the charges came down in regards to his activities, did it shock you?
Anytime you hear something that severe, it's a little bit shocking. But not really. I mean, Travis was, that was kind of his lifestyle from the first day I met him. Like, not the most upstanding and polished guy. Now, child porn's a bit severe. Like I said, the severity of what was going on or what he was charged with surprised me. But to find out that he was in serious trouble with the law, again, didn't surprise me.
I mean, and it sounds like, from what you're saying about all, his other dealings with, telling a guy who's going to drive him there, I'll do this, and then knocking him out and taking his money. This sounds like an opportunist, and that's not just going to be limited to one part of your life. I would think it's going to have to be through all of it. When you think, I mean, if you're showing that aspect and doing that to people, from the fight scene, I mean, when you it makes sense, you can do that in every aspect of your life. I don't think you're going to limit to one aspect.
Right. And like I said, that's why the severity of it was a little surprising, but not the fact that he was in pretty serious trouble. You find out Travis is wanted because he robbed a liquor store. Absolutely. Not even remotely surprising, wanted because he got in a bar fight and beat the shit out of some guy really bad. Not even remotely surprising.
Sure.
Porn. Okay. That's a little more surprising.
Well, manufacturing.
But it's in the ballpark.
Yeah. Yeah, I was surprised. I knew him for faults that he had with his integrity and things like that. But I guess I don't know. I still that kind of severe, not just the pornography, but sex with minors, things like that. I mean, I was just disheartened. That, I guess, more than anything. And I hated that it was someone I knew.
Yeah, it's even like more dirty. Like, you feel even dirtier. So in 2008, Jeremy Jackson, California fame, he was arrested of breaking into his girlfriend's apartment with a gun, ex-girlfriend's apartment with a gun, had non-consensual sex. She held hostage for a few hours, goes to the hospital, does a rape kit. He gets charged, and his friends and family were online screaming at the top of their lungs, he's innocent, he's innocent, he's innocent. Like, this isn't true. She's this, that, the other thing. And they pooled their money. They asked people to donate money. It goes all the way up into the trial. Before they walked in that room, the story was that he just got sick and tired of fighting it and took a guilty plea and is doing like 22 years for his crime. So it shocked his family. It shocked everybody that was supporting him. And it was pretty mind blowing because the community at that time was much smaller than it is now. And I was at Chad Bergmeyer's fight either a week or two after that, where I ran into Travis and it was coming out of his mouth like, oh, can you believe that, Jeremy Jackson? Can you believe it? And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of messed up. And he goes right into a conversation about child pornography. But I mean, it's like I was kind of shocked, you know, at it as well. Chris, what was your take on it?
Like I said, I didn't know him super. Only times I really had any conversations with the guy at all was at fights. You know, starting in the 90s, you know, we'd be on some of this. It was a small community back then. And I mean, to me, he was just this guy who fought all the time. That's really what I knew about him. I mean, obviously back then you saw him fight in the UFC, and anybody who fought in the UFC back in the day was, they were one of the best guys in the world, you know? So I knew him as that. And then, as his career, I don't know if the right word is dwindled, but you know, he kind of went down that road. Like I said, that I would equate to more of a Reggie Strickland, but not the same. Like I said, just a guy who fought all the time, every weekend he could, but with no real goal in sight of greatness. It was just to compete. So I kind of looked at him as that. And then, you know, that's kind of all I knew him as, really. But just to hear this is like, man, I hadn't really heard too many stories of him, you know, all the advantages he'd taken of people. You know, we really didn't really run the same circles too much. So hearing all this is a little surprising to me, but it's definitely unfortunate, man. I mean, I hate seeing a guy who had somewhat ability and talent the way I mean, you know, I don't think people realize the grind and how tough it is to make it in this sport. And to be really good, you have to really dedicate a lot of your life to it. And I get it, man. It's sometimes it's easier just to take a different route. And it sounds like he took that route. It's fought a lot. But I mean, doing the stuff like Jeremy did, just taking all the hours of your life and how much dedication it takes, it's a legitimate grind. And it's not the glorious thing you see. You're training all the time. You're doing, it's just a tough thing. So I would like to see him go that route, but he didn't. And but it makes for, I mean, it makes for interesting characters to have in this sport. Like I said, boxing's full of them, and I like people to know all the different avenues and all the different things that have been in this sport, and he's definitely one of them.
Yeah. And let's.
He's
go ahead,
one
Mike.
of the pioneers. I mean, you gotta, you know, he's back there when all of us were just starting, and there was no commissions, and that's what, like we said earlier, that's what allowed him to do what he did. But towards the end, I'd say 5 years ago, I talked to him and I asked him why he was still doing stuff. And he goes that by that time, he was just trying to make money. He didn't really want to have a job. And so he would go, you know, he was beating up nobodies for $500. It was money.
He, I mean, if you look at the totality of like how he had a rabid penchant for fighting because he took as many fights as he can. And as Chris said, you have to assume it kind of bleeds into other areas of his life. When the second victim came forward, it kind of let me know, like, wow. And they also had like zip drives that they had with other pornography. He was not only manufacturing this pornography, but he was trading it with people across the country, which is why the feds got in. Like, if you look at pornography charges on a local level, as horrible as it is, there's very little teeth. In the big metropolitan cities, 2 victims, probably looking at 6 years. You know, it's not crazy time that you would imagine or want the person to take on. But yeah, he had minimally 2 victims, and he wasn't pushing it any further because I'm assuming the longer the investigation takes, the longer the time that's on the table. And the duration of the time that was offered to him at this point was 70 years if he took it to trial with what they had now. And if we continue opening these books, it's probably going to increase. And like at that point, you can't really add more years because you're going to die here. So what they do is they just put you in like states where it's always really cold outside. So you're kind of in like a real shitty state, like Alaska, you know, something like that. And that's where you lose your leverage. Did it surprise you that he killed himself, Monte?
You know, I always wonder, what does it take? I just have never been in a position where I was so unhappy that I would even consider it. I'm too happy being alive. So I wonder what it takes and what was going through his mind, what was in front of him. You know, if he's going to do 20 years, I'm sure he's thinking, what's going to happen to me? I mean, do I have to look over my shoulder every time? Do I worry about going to the shower? I can only think that he's worried about all that kind of stuff. It's what it takes to end it all, you know.
Jeremy, what's your take?
Yeah, I agree with Monte. I mean, there's been some ups and downs in everybody's life. Mine is, no different. But never have I been in such a bad spot that I thought, you know what, I just don't want to do this anymore. I'm out. But I also,
You've never been up on federal charges of manufacturing child pornography.
Travis didn't have an amazing life to begin with. I mean, he had moments where he, I'm sure, was enjoying his life, but like we've all discussed, I mean, at the end of the day, he's just taking fights for $500 a pop because he doesn't want to get a job. I'm sure his home life is miserable. He's not living the life he wants to. He starts mixed up in some really nasty shit. Now it looks like you're going to spend the remainder of your life in jail.
Most of it, yeah.
Yeah, like, all right, that's a pretty low point. My life has been shit so far. Now it's reaching rock bottom, and it's guaranteed not going to get better.
You know, when I think about it now, I talked about how the way that he was seen in his hometown and how important it was that he was a hero and everything. That now that I think about it, that's all crumbling down. Everything that he built all these fights on and stuff, everyone for the rest of his life, even when he got out, was going to look at him as like a piece of crap. So, I mean, I'm sure his whole world came crashing.
No anonymity, not where he lived. And if you look at the way he handled his fight career, as has been discussed, he's always taken the easy route, like not a lot of work, a lot of talent, not a lot of work. So a Travis Fulton in a dormitory setting, which, I mean, you're looking at 30 to 50 guys in a dorm room. He's just sitting in bed late at night going, 15, 17, 18 years of this. Yeah, it's not going to happen. I can see him just, Jeremy, I asked you about his character. Was he embarrassed? No. Monte, was he embarrassed? Nah. That's the type of guy that'd do it.
Yeah. Just the kind of guy that really was looking to coast through life. I mean, everybody would like to be known for doing something great. In Travis's eyes, it was, the fighting career in his hometown. But eventually he's like, you know what? This sucks. I don't want to do this anymore. So I'm done.
Yeah. Well, hey, I would just like to thank you guys for being here and talking about this. I think it's an important, to talk about his career. So I was glad you guys were able to come here and shed some light on this, help us out a little bit. Mike, you got anything else to add?
Man, it's sad. It's sad for everybody. It's sad for Travis's family. It's sad for the victims. Sad for the people that actually cared about him. And sad for the MMA community, and that's it. It is what it is. Yeah, everyone's talking about him.
Yeah. I got a call from his I believe it's his sister, and she wanted me to put a value on all of his belts and all that kind of stuff. And he was asking her to, because he was trying to sell off everything that he could. I don't know what he needed that for, maybe money in prison, whatever. But she was calling and saying asking me what they were worth. And I said, honestly, the belts are worth something to the person that won them, but no one, I don't want a belt from someone else, so not too much. And she was disappointed, but they were going through his stuff, trying to, at his direction, to try to find out, what he could get.
Wow. Wow. Jeremy, do you want to close this out? Another little story if you got one?
Well, I mean, it's kind of on the other side of this. I remember when he fought, God, I'm drawing a blank on his name, a Brazilian guy that runs a jiu-jitsu school up in Minneapolis, I believe. He was training Travis Fulton for a little while.
Is Aaron Riley one of Aaron Riley's first fights?
Yeah.
Come on, Chris.
I know him too, and I can't.
Mario Roberto.
That's it.
There we go.
That's it.
Miguel still fainted.
Yeah, so I mean, I remember in that fight, I mean, Travis was in it. He took a hell of a beating. He never gave up. He never quit fighting back. Mario was just too much for him. I mean, he had a lot of potential, but in the end, he was just too lazy to really work for it. He was happy to just go as far as his natural guts would take him.
Yeah.
We do like the 50 Fight Club, and Monte, you're in that category, obviously. And we had said, all right, what about Fulton? This is before all of this happened, obviously. And the three of us were like, he'll be the last 50 Fight Club member we do, just based on the totality of what it is we know about the guy. It's just, we couldn't do it. Like, we couldn't do it. And, Chris and Miguel and we're just like, nah, we know too much.
Yeah.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.